Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of TrueDataOps. I'm your host, Keith Belanger, Field CTO here at DataOps.live and Snowflake Data Superhero. Each episode in this season, we are really exploring the topic of AI and AI ready data. If you've missed any of our previous episodes, you can visit us at DataOps.live YouTube channel, subscribe, you'll get notified for any upcoming episodes and when new ones are published. I'm really excited today. My guest today is Mark Bartlo. He's a colleague and principal sales engineer here at DataOps.live. Welcome, Mark, to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Thanks for taking time out of your day to let me talk.
Yeah, you and I have done a lot of talking
Yes.
the air, so it's exciting to have this conversation here live with everybody else. But I know you well, but many people don't. So, Mark, if you could take a moment just to give everybody a little bit of background about yourself and tell us who you are.
Yeah, Mark Bartlo. I've worked in the IT, sales, software, systems industry for many years now. Started at Unisys as a systems analyst, where I worked on internal manufacturing and distribution systems, and then progressed into advertising. I was a VP of co-op services and future technology and advertising. Did a little bit of ERP implementation at the turn of the century to solve Y2K problems. And then various jobs, product manager, technical sales. I was at a very large company for 11 years doing North American technical sales management. Then went into the Hadoop world, data replication as a senior director there. And then last 3.5 years at DataOps.live doing sales engineering and a whole bunch of other tasks.
I always find it interesting hearing everybody's data journey,
Yeah.
over the years and a lot of the overlap and differences that people bring. But today we are going to talk about skills and
Yes.
what the value is that they bring to the world of AI generated code. Now, you and I have had lots of discussions over skills at participating at some of the data for breakfasts and just in general. But Mark, before we get into skills, there's going to be a reason why we have skills. What is actually broken, but maybe that's a strong word today with AI assisted data engineering?
I wouldn't say it's broken, but there are definitely issues that need to be resolved and resolved fairly quickly because with the onset of this AI agent and for lack of a better term, vibe coding, because there's a lot of elements of that in the agentic AI code generation world, you got a little bit of chaos there. Now, for certain projects like developing your own system, like you hear of all the great feats of vibe coding, that's great. But for businesses where value creation for the end customers, the consumer of your products, very important, well, not as great. And you have no governance, no standards, no domain expertise, or not as much as you need. And you get that vibe coding chaos. So, what skills are going to do is address that.
Yeah, and what's interesting is we could literally take the same exact prompt, go into an AI generated code, and come up with two completely different developed pieces of code, right?
Yep.
That might be completely right, but to your point, from a governance, a repeatability, a standard for your organization, neither may even pass that check for your organization.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean,
Yep.
this is how I got into using Skills because I was doing the vibe coding thing with the DataOps.live platform in our development environment for the last, let's say, year, 6 months or so. And then it got to the point where I really wanted to condense what I was showing on occasions. And I said, boy, I just looked inside this Claude Skills thing. And this is only about 5 months ago that
Right.
this came out. And I said, if I could use Skills, then I could get that repeatable process and domain expertise I need in my session done. I won't have to worry about it. And again, get to what I really want to do or really want to show or condense that down. And that's what skills have helped me do with the
Yeah.
AI code and the AI agents.
As a somebody who has many years as the lead architect for many Snowflake implementations, one of the key things that was always stressed, you know, a stress point for me was how do you make sure many data engineers and all those participating in the development of your ecosystem that you have that level of consistency, right? And that repeatability that goes along with it. And so skills is really bring that ability for somebody like myself as an architect to sit here and say, this is how I want it done, right or indifferent. This is the consistency that we need, and you can put those into the skills. But we're talking about skills, but let's take the step back. So, Mark, what is a skill? Like, let's really break it down so people can understand what is it? What really is it?
The best way to do that is actually show it. So
Perfect.
I would say we just go in and I do one of the problems that I demo to prospects and customers, and I just run through it, yeah, for the rest of this session here. And uh, I'll show you what the skill is. I created a couple skills that I use, and we have a whole bunch of other ones that come with what we call Metis, our development environment. But showing it is probably a better way of showing it, describing what a skill is.
Perfect. Yeah, we can. I can see your Snowflake screen, so take it
Okay.
away.
So here's a production database, AAA DataOps CI/CD. You can see I have a service schema and a customer table, and a simple, somewhat simple problem. I want to add a C_status column to this table. And of course, if you ever follow the true principles of DataOps, you won't go and do this right in production. Of course, you're going to do this in a sandbox. So I created this zero copy clone using DataOps.live. And this is where I'm going to add that C status column. But without the data for the C status, it doesn't mean anything. And what that entails is loading the data with a stage. So you have to create a stage, creating a job to do that, creating an orchestrator configuration on the table to say, get the data from that stage into this column, and then updating the pipeline, the CI/CD pipeline to do all that. Those 4 or 5 steps were something that I used to kind of vibe code in it, and I would get it right most of the time. I like to say I would cajole the right answer out of the AI agent, and I never knew what I was getting. Now, did that make it a little bit exciting and fun? Yes. But to your point, for a business, it's not really the best outcome. You want that value creation to be more predictable. So let's go in and do that. So what I did is in DataOps.live, I ran this pipeline that basically created my zero copy clone, my feature branch environment, my sandbox, if you will. It's just called add column. And you could see that if I want to observe what that job did, set up Snowflake, that's just taking the configuration, infrastructure as code configuration, and applying it to the sandbox. And you could see the first thing it did is it created that sandbox environment. Now, if something goes wrong and I don't get the result I want, I can easily start over, tear it down, and start up again, just like a container would be used in DevOps in software, very similar to that. And now you just literally simply go into the project, into the branch, and then open this in develop. And that's what I did here. And I asked the question, prepping for this, what is a skill? And here's what Metis said. In the context of Metis, the DataOps.live, a skill is a specialized capability module that helps Metis, the AI assistant, provide targeted expertise for specific DataOps.live tasks and workflows. Great. What that means in a nutshell is it provides domain expertise and very concentrated context for what you're going to create. And you could see there, specialized domain, structured format. And look at this, skills are organized with consistent format. A name and description that defines when the skill should be used. It's in English. I call it programming English. Task-oriented. Skills are designed to help with specific tasks like, oh, surprise, surprise, creating stage configurations for data ingestion. That's exactly what we're going to do here. That's exactly the
and
problem I solved.
and
And
what's
you
really
could,
key there, Mark, is
yeah,
that every organization might have a different way they want to do those particular things that
yes,
you're highlighting. There's a million ways to do the same thing. You just want to make sure it's being done the same within your organization.
Absolutely. And it is very much results oriented. So the example I use for getting really into the weeds for code is you don't care if it uses a for loop, a while loop, or a repeat loop if it always gives you the right answer. But
Correct.
it's good if it can be more deterministic. And you can see here's the skills that are available in DataOps.live. All of these are literally help you build what the 7 principles of DataOps are in your project. And I created these two: add call stage for ingesting data from S3 buckets into new columns, and get column meaning for determining business meaning of table columns. So I added those two because I needed to. It was a necessity. So let's get right into it. This one will just use the generic skills or context that DataOps.live provides out of the box. So the first thing I need to do is to add the column. And then notice I'm not doing it going into the YAML anymore. I'm saying, I mean, this is the way the world is going. And I don't have to save archar1 because it will ask me, but as I use it, I know what to ask for not. And then add column 2, and now this is very interesting. I could literally pick the configuration file I want right in there, and off we go. And now we're getting into what's similar to a vibe coding world. I call it more agentic AI development. And now it's going off and it's saying, hey, look, I want to edit this file. I'll have to add this column, and boom, it's done. Now, something as simple as that, you'd be surprised sometimes how long that could take to do with these type of configurations. This whole process I'm going through right now, I didn't do it for a while, about 4, 5, 6 months ago.
Right.
And to get it right took me an hour and 20 minutes.
Right. The old-fashioned way. Or should I say how you did it last year?
How we did it literally that in computer years 25 years ago, in tech years. But now, so I got my C status here, and actually it's probably going to add it at the back of it. You know, let's do a little vibe coding. See, before I go, I'll say fix the C status column to be at the end and this is an example of that type of vibe coding type thing, because it put it in you put it in between, and it was going to put it at the end anyway. That's just the way Snowflake works, but I'm a little bit picky on that. And now I got it the way I want. But this is a good example because this is the way you work in this world today.
You know what? And you just brought up, that's what you just did is another even thing you could define inside
Absolutely.
your skill, right? To say, hey, all new columns must be added to the end, right? When you have a certain thing that you want.
I could. And this is generic enough where it's going to get it right all the time. And like I said, it's easy enough to fix. Now, let's do, and I'm going to force it to use the skill now. So this is the first skill we're using here. And then after I get this done, I'll go into the actual skill and show you what the programming English looks like in this skill using Metis skill. And again, I could find the skill, so I'm going to force it. And I'll just start typing something like add column stage. I'll say ingest data from public bucket, so an S3 bucket, and I'll give it the name because it will need to know. This is almost like replacing a form that you would fill out. File, I'll tell which file because this has the new C status data in it. And then I'll say and include new job because it has to create a job and add it to the pipeline and pipeline. And this is the part where I used to vibe code and do each one of these separately. And like I said, cajole it into giving me the right answer. Now with the skills, it should find the skill and say, I know how to do this. And look, it's going into the meta skills and finding the assets and getting an idea of what it's going to have to do here.
Yeah, and having been going back in the past, it's like, oh, I got to get it from the file, and then I got to get it into
Right,
a stage, and I got to create
right.
a pipeline to do that, and then I got to get it from there to the final end destination, which could be a lot of steps manually to
Yeah.
do, right?
And now you got the
And
proverbial
and it's
to-do
telling you
list.
right there what it's doing, right? Those steps.
Absolutely. And I used to do these separately. And that used to be the bane of my existence because it forgot for us. Now, look, it wants to make a directory change. So I add a directory. It did that. And now look, boom, the code is generated for that stage configuration there. This is the part that still appears to be magic to me on a certain level, that it's able to do this so well. Now it's going to go into the customer table and using the skill, figure out how to make it orchestrate that data there. So it took he has the C status, and now it says, use that stage, get that file, and orchestrate it in. For you, those of you who aren't familiar with DataOps.live, that's the way we could do stage ingestion from object storage. Now it's going to make a directory for my job.
Yep.
And now it's going to have to do that because it has to know how does the job. And there's a series of orchestrators that DataOps.live has, and one of them is stage ingestion. Take data from a stage and add that stage to the job. And there, look, it understands the environment variables, the context. So think of domain expertise and context. And that's what
Yep.
these skills are doing. And we're like 3/4 of the way there now. And you notice I haven't touched anything. And now it's
Right.
going into the full cycle. And this is because I set up the skill to do this. And there it
It's funny.
goes.
I can remember sitting there,
Yeah.
we're talking about a skill years ago and sitting there and say, I wrote a document or how you're going to take data from a file and bring it to a
Yes.
stage. And then you would sit in front of a whiteboard with a team of data engineers and you'd make sure everybody understood it. Now as a seasoned person, like, or people who are listening, if you're an experienced, you're a lead, you're the architect, now you really want to put your stamp on those skills to make sure when people are vibe coding and doing this type of stuff, it's being executed the way you want it to be done.
It's not going to be uncommon, I think, for people to take the skills they create with them wherever they go. And it's going to
Yeah.
be like, here's the skills I have with me. Not only
Yeah.
your personal trait skills, but the skills you actually. And now, look, and this is what I love. It did those steps and it's explained exactly what I did. And now, not really having to know Git anymore because we store these in a repo, I could say commit and sync changes. And
Yep.
I'm learning Git more this way than I did
Because you're
before. Of
seeing the
course,
commands.
yes, because I see the commands all the time. Now, of course, I knew it and all, but I would
Right.
always get one of these things wrong.
Wrong.
And now this is just becoming commonplace where, look, it's adding a commit message based on what it did. And now
And
it's going to,
what's great too is that this isn't like an autonomous thing that just
no,
happening and you're blind, is that you're seeing what it's doing. You could stop it, correct it, change directions if you're
absolutely.
seeing something that isn't right. So it's kind of like it's AI is, like you said, AI assist with human, right, interaction to make sure it's getting right. Back to what you said about taking your skills with you. I can remember for many years I was consulting with Snowflake, and now I would go to a new company, say, hey, do you have certain standards? And like, boop, yep, I would pull it out of my back pocket, say, this is how
Yep.
I do a slowly changing dimension, or this is how I do this, which might be the same as other architects or different. Everybody has their way, but to your point, it's this is how I've had success, and you can take those with you.
Yeah, and I mean literally it created those changes for me here. So it should have, if everything's going well, it should have kicked off a CI/CD pipeline, and it did. See, add C status column, and it automated that pipeline, and we should see an extra job in there. So we should
Yep.
see in the Snowflake setup, not only that the column was added, but it ingested data from the stage there. And now
And
let's look at the skill actually.
And actually, before you go on, just to really plug here, what people understanding is like, not only did you just build that pipeline, but back to the true data ops, you have all of the audits, you have all of everything you need, the documentation, everything has already been captured. You don't have to worry about, oh, I'm going to come back to that later, right?
Right, exactly. Right. So yeah, so here's the pipeline running. And while this runs, and this will take a few minutes, I'll actually go a little bit more into, and you could see if we go into the repo, you could see the commit here for the branch. Again, remember the sandbox, we're doing in the sandbox. And if you look, that's the one I just added, and there's the diffs. I mean, this is just beautiful with what it did. But let's go and look at the skill now, because these are what come. There's standard ones that come, and there's just the .meta skills directory. So they're versioned too.
Yep.
They're versioned, and you notice the ones that came out of the box were just add skills. These are the ones I created. So let's look at the add column stage. All skilled. So what they are, actually physically what they are, they all have a skill.md file. And this is just, again, programming English. And this, what they call format or header piece of it, is required, where you name the skill and the description. This description is very important, because if I didn't force it to use the skill, it would use the skill based on this description. When a user asks to ingest data from an S3 bucket to load data in a new column, create a stage configuration, a stage ingestion job, and update full cycle to run the job. If it sees that and it's a match, it does what calls progressive disclosure. It says, okay, I will use this, and then it starts loading the skill MD. Now, why is this important? From a geeky technical reason, it's important because it limits the number of tokens you use. Instead of loading a whole bunch of context that's going to blow your context window out, that's this thing right here. Instead of doing that, it will load this, and then it's English, when to use the skill. Here's the location, here's the configuration, and the quick references are very important at the bottom here. Use stage creation, use reference this MD. Stage ingestion job, use this. Table orchestrators, use this. Ready to copy asset example. So you could give examples in the assets directory. So you look at these, and this is like what I would call a full open skill standards. There are open skill standards, and this adheres to those standards. So here's an example of the load job here. Stage configuration and how to do them. Examples that'll use as templates. So almost think of them as a new form of a user interface you're building for somebody, and some assets, like, for example, an example of what that configuration looks like. So the model can use that context and that domain expertise to build it. Now let's see if our pipeline finished, kind of like a cooking show here, right?
Well, the other thing too, to add on to that, what's also great about the skills, like you said, is you don't have to be a highly technical person.
No,
You just have to understand your process, what you want to do. It's like your code is your documentation. It's like all one in the same.
Yes, it becomes, and this is what's going to lead to hopefully a future TrueDataOps cast, is that the specification becomes the source of the truth. And specifications will use well-defined skills as part of a platform. And that hierarchy will be more important to understand the intent. It'll be intent-driven development. So let's look what happened here in Snowflake quickly. I'll see that it should have added the new column. It did. And it added that stage to ingest it. And then it added this job. And this is where you always got tripped up. This is what always would take many times. And it loaded the data successfully in my feature branch. So if I go to the feature branch now, and I see, refresh this thing, I'm just going to go and view the table here and refresh it. And voila, we have the C status. That literally took 10, 15 minutes. That, again, took me an hour and 20 minutes to do like 4 months ago. And you see, C status has a value A, B, and I believe a C. Wouldn't it be great if we could ask Metis, what does that C status column really mean?
Right.
So let's use a skill and do that now. Since we have this branch, let's ask this, let's say, and I'll force it to use a skill using Metis skill at, and I'll type meaning. And so I get column meaning in the I'll just say let's say again, programming English, in current database environment, tell me why, I'll say newly added, and again, programming English in context, C status column contains values A, B, or C. Now, this is something I've been hoping for like literally years and years. Now look, it's smart enough based on the skill to say, get the environment. And look, it got the feature branch environment there. Now what I instructed it to do is run some SnowSQL commands. So I'm managing tools with skills. Right. Different from MCP. MCP and skills are both needed, but if everything's local, skills might be better answers for you. Let me query more stuff. So it's querying more stuff here.
Man, the way we used to do data profiling and stuff years ago,
yeah.
Right? Separate tool, connect this, write some
Look at
SQL.
That. I mean, it's breaking it down. And this is where I say it's a great learning experience, because it's breaking it down the way a very good analyst or architect or data analyst would break it down. So it's getting the values for A, B, and C here. Now let's look at something else. Okay, it's doing some type of average.
In kind of, again, going back to, the pillars of DataOps is,
you
take what's happening here, and you showed that pipeline. You could sit there and say, well, let's test to make sure after every run we only have A, B, and C. Let's all of these things that really make sure that you're not drifting, right? When you're loading your data, that's going to affect your AI, whether you're doing ML or any other things downstream from these pipelines. It's just cyclical thing. You could build your tests, not just when you're creating it, but your continuous running of your pipelines.
Well, look what it did. It said, after analyzing, here's what I got. C status means status A, premium customers, balance range, average balance. These are high value customers with largest account, represents in good standing. B, average standard customers, regular, having a positive balance, average balance, represents the middle tier. And then C, negative balance. Customers with represents customers who may require credit collection actions. And look at the business significance. Yeah. I mean, and I don't know what I'm going to do. I like it so much. I'm just going to say, again, this is a little bit of vibe coding. Save this analysis as documentation in an MD file. There you go. And now it's going to go off and change and save this as part of the change. So look, it's going to make a directory called docs for me in my repo.
Yep.
And now it's going to basically build out. I think it's going to build out what it just said there, and incorporating and understanding the change. But that, and again, I will show that skill, because it was a different approach to this skill, and I'll show that. But look at that. I mean, and it gives even example query how to do it. Now it's going to go off, because it understood what I did before. It's adding the get. And I mean, this is just the lazy person's nirvana, basically. These
are all the things, Mark, that, when I was we were always, you got to deliver, the business needed to deliver. You would skip something, right?
Yes, you would always
skip the documentation, or you skip thorough testing because you need to get to the business. Here, you've skipped nothing. And in reality, you're adding above and beyond. And those people who are in highly regulated, whether it's banking, financial services, insurance, healthcare, that level of depth is necessary for those types of industries.
Absolutely. And now look, it's running the pipeline again. So the automation, the DataOps automation platform, you never could forget that's what's at the core of DataOps.live, the automation. And this is all about automation, but it's improving automation. Now let's look at that last skill here. And now, of course, We would merge this to the upper environment afterwards. That's the governance, that's the
Yep.
rules, but let's look at the skill for get column meaning. And you notice I didn't use any of the directories or anything else. All I did was describe when a user wants to determine what a table's column means in business terms. For example, question, when to use a skill, I say, use this command to get the current environment because that's important. And that means it'll work when you move it to prod because it will do that in prod. I mean, or whatever environment. And now I just say here, use Snowflake's Snow CLI to query the database. And then here's an example of a query. And then I just say very simply, elaborate on why the value of the column has its derived value. That's it. And that gave me the answer I want. And now if we look into our Metis, there's our docs directory. And look at that.
There's the documentation.
Look at that. I mean, that is just incredible. I mean, this is literally, that last piece I did could be 2 to 3 days worth of work.
Oh,
to get it
easily.
right.
And sometimes, we would have an agile squad of people doing different parts of this, right? In working together. But, unfortunately, Mark, I know you and I could go on for hours and hours doing this. And I think hopefully we've given people a teaser here of what, skills can do, how you can take those repeatable things and then everybody can leverage them. But if you were to say, hey, what would you want people to take away from today? Like one thing that you would want people to take away from.
Yeah, run actually a couple things. One thing would be start using it and see what works for you. This didn't work on my first crack. I mean, if you looked at my commit history here, I made a lot of changes to get these right. And I actually simplified them. I started probably too complex and I narrowed them down. So that's one thing. So that's certainly important to experiment and see what works for you. But the other thing is the agency. Keep on top of this, the continuous learning. Keep doing this. This is going to continue to evolve quickly. Stay on top of it, see what works, see what you could incorporate in your environment to, again, create that business value, that value creation. That's what we're talking about here, accelerating value creation. And that's it. So, Keith, it's been a pleasure joining your podcast.
This has been exciting. I've definitely enjoyed it, Mark. If anybody wants to learn more, see more, talk with us more, definitely please reach out. We're happy to give a personal demonstration or how this could work with your organization. But again, Mark, thanks for joining us, and for everybody else, thanks for paying attention, for watching, and hope to see you next time. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.